Welcome to VLGA Connect. My name is Catherine Arndt and I'm the Chief of the VLGA Connect studio. I hope you enjoy today's Connect episode brought to you by the VLGA, the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hello everyone, Chris Eddy with you in the VLGA Connect studios, and I've popped in today to introduce a very special discussion about the Australian Research Council Linkage Project, which is looking at women in local government, investigating the chronic underrepresentation of women in Australian politics, but with a local government lens, as we've just come past the halfway mark of the four-year council term in Victoria. A great panel to talk about their findings so far, and to talk them through that, I'm very pleased to introduce a new member of the VLGA team. Here's Brónagh Ní Chuilinn.
Hello and welcome to the Victorian Women's Charter. My name is Brónagh Ní Chuilinn and I'm here with Professor Andrea Carson, Professor Leah Ruppanner and Dr Gosia, Mikolajczak, the VLGA's partner in very exciting Australian Research Council Linkage Grant project, examining the political trajectories of women in local government. You're all very welcome today.
Lovely to be here.
Thank you.
So Leah, I will just start with you. Can you tell us just about the project, please?
So we are a group of interdisciplinary scientists, political scientists, sociology, and psychology. And what we're really interested in understanding are what are the major barriers to women's electability, what happens for this one cohort of local government elected officials over the next 4 years. So we're interested in understanding the experiences, the blockages, the expectations, the next steps, basically the holistic lives of this group of local government officials and their experiences over time.
And Andrea, I'll just go over to you now. What have you found to date and what can you tell us so far?
So far we've focused on two main areas, and that is what brings women into local government, and also what are factors that might lead them to not wanting to recontest, or if they're considering running for office in the first instance, what are some of the turn-off factors? And we found many things, but essentially we find that the median age or the average age of councillors is 51, and for women it tends to be higher. And the reason for that is that we find women more so than men experience what we call role strain, and that is too many things going on in their lives at the same time, and it's very hard to fit being a counsellor in as well as raising a family, as well as holding down a career. Men also have those struggles, but not to the same degree, and we find this is a particular inhibitor for younger women. But we're also looking at, once they get into, even if they overcome some of those obstacles, once they get into council, what are some reasons why they may not recontest? And again, we're finding that younger women tend to be targeted more than other councillors when it comes to abuse, and particularly abuse that has a gendered component to it, where a woman's gender is being referred to. And whether it's online or offline trolling, or a particular hostilities or sexual harassment, we find that it's hitting this younger cohort. But there is a positive story we're also finding, and that is that women are highly electable. Even though fewer women run for office or for council, we find that they outperform men. And this is particularly so in metropolitan councils. And of course, you will know the breaking news at the state government level that the upper house of the state government now has more women than men in the upper house. So that again shows that this isn't just a phenomenon that's occurring at the local government level, which is what we found, but is also true of other tiers of government.
And Gosia, would you be able to tell us about the survey that is about to go out, and what are you focusing on?
Yeah, actually we launched the survey already last week, and we already have 70 responses. So I just had a look. But it would be great if more councillors were willing to participate in the survey. So in the previous years, we got roughly 200 responses, so 1 in 3 councillors participating in the survey. which provided us with some really robust data about their current experiences. And building on what Andrea said, this year we want to, like, we know from previous surveys that a lot of counselors are experiencing workplace incivility, gender abuse and harassment. We want to learn about what reporting mechanisms are there in place and how we can improve, what recommendations we can put forward to improve the to address the negative experiences the counselors might be experiencing. We also want to ask them about the biggest challenges they're experiencing on an everyday basis and what policies we could recommend that the councils introduce to make their lives easier.
And Andrea, just back to you, I understand that the results of some of our work to date have been published. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So we've got one paper that has been published. It went out for peer review in academic terms and appears in the Australasian Journal of Parliamentary Affairs, which I'm sure we can post up on our website for those that are interested, or even on the VLGA website. And that's the one about the missing cohort, those younger women. And one of the other findings we got out of that paper was that this missing cohort also applies to a lesser degree to women in the regions, that we see there's more men that are putting their hand up to run for local council there than there are women. And some of the viewers of this podcast might have some good understanding of why that's the case. And just to add to Gosia's call out, we're only as good as the data that we get. And we've been so fortunate that this is a really responsive group of counsellors over the 4 years. This will be the fourth wave of this survey work that we've been doing. So if it's landed in your inbox, I know you've got lots of things to do before Christmas, but please fill out the survey because it gives us such rich data to understand what your lives are like as counsellors, and also to work with government, which we have been doing with the state government and with other stakeholders, to be able to make recommendations about how things can be improved. So as Leah said, you know, the bottom line is that we end up with a more equitable and equal council across the 79 local government jurisdictions.
And Leah, what are the lessons that we are taking away from this?
I think it's important to understand that women are having different experiences to men in local government and in their experience as counselors. We only can do that, however, if we have the men participate in the studies too. So I know we've been talking a lot about, you know, the gendered piece on this, but we can only see those differences if our men counselors also participate. So I want to just stress that, right? That this is actually about including everyone, and we really want to hear what are the barriers and blockages for both men and women. But this is kind of what we're understanding, that the experiences of women counselors are similar to those of men in many ways, but distinct in really meaningful ways. And how do we put a spotlight on that? Not just the academic stuff, fine, right? But really what we're doing is trying to talk about this more broadly in our conversations with the press, in our conversations with government officials, in our conversations with broader audiences. And so that participation is really critical of both men and women to say, here's what's happening, and here's where we're seeing kind of the barriers and the blockages. We find that out very clearly from the women and men in council themselves. And so any other insights, ideas you have, please feel free to send us an email. We often have an open text point too, where you can kind of share your thoughts and ideas for things that we've missed. That's really critical for us. We look at that, we read it, and we're hearing what you're saying through that kind of open channel. So this is my just kind of final. We know we're setting this at the worst time of year, but we're doing that in part to get that consistency across the data so that we can talk about the same group at different points in time. I don't think there is another data set that exists that is like this in the world. You are participating in the only data set in the world that is following local government counselors over time, over the duration of their careers, to really understand what are their experiences. And we're incredibly grateful for that, and just really trying to put a showcase, a spotlight on that data in all the ways that we can.
And if I might add, we're really excited about the next year. We've done 2 years of this research, but there's still more areas for us to investigate. We're very curious to know with political parties getting more involved in local government, how that shapes the experience that councillors are having as candidates and also once they're elected. So that's possible future work we'll be looking at. We're also keen to know the performance of different councils and how they compare when you have, say, a female CEO or a mayor or a predominantly male council versus a predominantly female council. And the experts on all of this are the people who are viewing it. We're just here to be able to collect information around that and then to be able to analyze it. But the real experts are those who are experiencing it. So we're very keen to hear of those experiences. And we've talked a bit about the survey work that we do, but we also do in-depth interviews. And that's where we really get some of that more granular detail coming through about particularly the hostility that younger women have experienced. And as Leah says, some of these things happen across the board. We know men experience hostility as well, but they tend not to get the gender abuse that we particularly see coming out for younger councillors.
And can I ask Andrea, and I suppose to Leah and to Gosia as well, is there anything that you have found that has been quite surprising to date?
Yeah, I can think of something, and that was the mixed blessing or the two-edged sword that was COVID. The pandemic. So on one side, we found that the election for this was October 2020. So we're in the middle of, we didn't know we were in the middle of the pandemic then. We were hoping we were coming out, but that wasn't to be the case. So it really changed the way that local government candidates were able to campaign. And we found through some of those experiences that most of that, of course, reverted to the digital space. And on one hand, when you've got candidates, particularly women with homeschooling and young kids around and trying to care for older parents and doing the housework and all those sorts of things, which we know from the data disproportionately affects women more than men, in the digital space, they were still able to do campaigning. So that was the positive. The negative was, of course, that they were doing all these other jobs and having the kids around, particularly in Victoria, that made that difficult. But also, as Gosia can speak to this, we know that incivility also targets women online. So while these digital tools can be wonderful on one hand, they can also be a vehicle for women in particular to be targeted.
Gosia, would you like to make a comment on that?
Yeah, I guess that speaks to the negative surprise that we found. So already after 1 year in council, some female councillors were considering quitting, so like not running in the next elections due to the harassment they've been experiencing and the viciousness of it, and including snail mail and negative comments from the small communities they were representing was something that struck us as really negative. Like, we know a lot about hostility at the higher echelons of the government, but this was something we didn't really expect to find.
And Gosia, wouldn't you say too that we were surprised at the lack of recourse that councillors have when they do experience this abuse? And we found that it came from both fellow councillors as well as the public. And when it comes from the public, there's not that many available avenues to be able to deal with that abuse. Yeah,
that's why we want to ask about some like more in-depth questions this year to understand what avenues people have tried using and whether they've found them efficient and how we could actually improve the mechanisms to make their experiences better.
Leah, have you anything to add to that?
I just, I think I was going to say kind of the things that they had said, which are surprises, but I think I want to just add a little bit of a hopeful note, which is like, despite the fact that women are experiencing very different, very difficult and very challenging work and home and experiences in the political sphere, they're stepping in to run, right? They're stepping in to run at high levels. And as we've shown in our data, if they step in to run, they're highly electable. And so I think that is a real testament to the strength, the resilience, and the courage of these women to be putting their hands up, to do something for the community, to participate in the political process. And I just want to celebrate that, or acknowledge that what we're showing is a lot of what we kind of already knew. But despite it all, women are still there. They're not giving up, they're in it. And let's just give some applause to that.
Absolutely. Long may it continue. Gosia, just quickly back to you. After this survey, what are some of the methodologies to source information for this project?
Yeah, I think Leah has spoke to that aspect already. So like what we're really interested in is comparing experiences of like male and female counselors, but we also know that men and women are not homogeneous groups. So we want to look at whenever possible at experiences of counselors with diverse backgrounds to see how factors such as age, ethnicity, or being in the region or metro areas, or just the specific characteristic of a specific counselors in affect their experiences.
We have a website too where you can find some of our stuff. We can send that through to VLGA, and we tend to show up to the International Women's Day experience. It will be, hopefully we'll be invited back next year, but
yes, absolutely.
No pressure. Sorry, no pressure.
Putting us on the spot now. No, of course. That's brilliant. We'll be able to put it up on our social media as well. So for anyone who's listening and who wants further information on that, please do check out our LinkedIn and our Twitter. We're very active on that. Andrea, just one final question for you. Will the findings from this research project be published prior to the 2024 local government elections, or does the project extend to post those elections in order to reach its final conclusions?
I think the answer is both. We're publishing as we go along. We take every opportunity we can to speak at public events, as my colleagues have already referred to. And we've also done a government report that we looked at on the experiences of COVID for women more broadly, not just local councillors, but how women are faring. And that can be found also on the website that we just quoted, or just enter COVID and women into Google and with our names, and it will come up. We're very mindful of what the very big broad goal here is, and that is that the Victorian government made a commitment that local government would have gender parity by 2025. So that means there's only one more election in place for that to be achieved, and that's 2024. And at the moment, women's representation is 43.8%. So there's a bit of a way to go. So once that election has occurred, there'll be work for us to do there as well to see whether that target's been met. If it hasn't been met, to draw some reflections from what we've been learning over what will be a 4-year period to be able to come to some solid conclusions around that.
And just off the back of that, Andrea, would you be surprised if that goal wasn't met by 2025?
I think it was always an ambitious goal. And I think on one hand, we should applaud ambitious goals because it's a really worthwhile one. But it is a big ask. No other council at state level has been able to do this. And to sustain it is the other thing. So that involves, and this is where we're very lucky to be partnering with the VLGA and all the good programs that it runs to help women understand what it takes to be a local government candidate and what it takes to be elected. And I think there's also great programs that run for councillors, men as well. But it's really important. I think Ruth McGowan, who's often speaking about this, says that if that target's to be met, you need to have at least 900 women putting their hand up at the next election to get there. So if you know someone who you think would be a great local government representative, tap them on the shoulder, encourage them. There are resources available through the VLGA to be able to do that.
And is there anything else that you would like to add before we finish up here today?
Yes, this sort of research, Gosia and Leah are absolute gender experts. So this sort of research really excites us because we get to see things as they're unfolding, and we're seeing a fairly positive story overall, and that is that women's electability is going up. Of course, we're also seeing a darker side as well, and being able to put a spotlight on that around the gender abuse and around the difficulties younger women, or some of the reasons that they might be hesitant, even though they're willing to go into local government. I think it's really important for us to highlight those things so that together we can work at making recommendations to inform public policy and, if need be, to inform state government legislation, which determines the local government space.
Gosia, have you anything to add to that?
I just want to repeat to encourage everyone who hasn't done it yet to participate in our survey. And like as I mentioned earlier, we want women in government, but we also want diverse women to be representing the communities.
Gosia, where do they find the survey and what happens if they haven't seen it yet?
I believe all councillors have received it in their mailboxes, and we're gonna send weekly follow-ups for the next few weeks so that everyone has a chance to see the invitation in case they missed it the first time.
And Leah, have you anything to add either at the end of this?
I'm just going to say thank you for your generosity and time, because we couldn't do this without everybody's participation. So thank you.
Well, it's a big group effort, and as Andrea said, this is the first kind of study or findings that has been, or research that has been done, and it's great to be a part of that history as well. For women. So long may it continue, and the very best luck. So thank you all. The VLGA is super excited to be a part of this project, and to the audience as well, as Gosia and Leah and Andrea said there, please do keep an eye out for that survey. We're really keen to get all of the Victorian councillors to complete it, men and women. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brónagh. Great job, and great to hear from the panel and about the progress with that terrifically exciting research project. We look forward to hearing more, and I hope you've enjoyed that special edition of VLGA Connect. Stay subscribed on YouTube and on your podcast player for more coming to you very soon. But for now, it's bye for now.